Trauma-Informed Care in Nursing Homes video series. Video 3, What is Trauma-Informed Care? Welcome to our Trauma-Informed Care video series for nursing home staff. Today we will be talking about what is trauma and trauma-informed care. Other videos in this series discuss trauma, the nature of traumatic experiences, and how trauma impacts a person's functioning, worldview, and engagement with services. As nursing home care providers, we understand that some residents have a history of trauma, some of which we know about and some of which we don't. We also know that living in a nursing home can be traumatizing in some ways to some individuals, as can the reality of aging and physical and mental decline. All of these factors can be happening at the same time, so it's important to meet the residents where they are. Nursing homes are unique service environments because people live there. So the issues that you all deal with and the situations that come up are going to be different because you have people that are there all the time. There are several other factors that make residential care facilities unique. Because residents live in the facility, staff really get to know them. That relationship can act as a buffer for additional trauma, or it can create its own challenges. Staff come into their jobs with their own trauma histories, so they can become triggered as well. Nursing homes tend to be very hierarchical, which can challenge staff's sense of empowerment, choice, and safety. In addition, in nursing homes, we are often engaged with residents' families. Families have their own dynamics, good or bad. We might sense that something is going on or that there's something they're not telling us, but we often don't have all or any of the information. Sometimes these family dynamics represent trauma history within the family, something that happened that caused a rift many, many years ago, and that is now coming to a head again. For these reasons and other, trauma-informed care looks different in different settings, but there is a common language that connects these efforts. Trauma-informed care is a model of care that keeps the potential for re-traumatization forefront in our minds. When we understand what trauma is, what it looks like, and how it impacts people, we can start to implement trauma-informed practices and policies. Our goal is to ensure residents are able to fully engage in the services and care we are providing, hence the need for trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care. What is it? As we learn about what characterizes trauma-informed care, it's important to keep our eye on the distinction between trauma-informed care and other efforts, such as patient-centered care and diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is a great deal of overlap, but there are also unique considerations as well. For organizations, programs, and services striving to be trauma-informed, one of the key pieces is the focus on trauma, understanding the vulnerabilities or triggers of trauma survivors, and working to put policies and practices into place in order to avoid that. We want to make sure that our services are delivered in a way that people can feel safe and fully engaged. Although trauma-informed care doesn't address the impact of trauma directly, it creates an opportunity for healing and an environment where residents and staff can grow and thrive. In video 1, we mentioned SAMHSA's 4 R's of being trauma-informed. An organization will realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand the paths for recovery, recognize what that looks like in clients, families, staff, and other people involved, and respond by fully integrating that knowledge into the procedures, practices, and policies of the organization in order to, again, resist re-traumatization. It's important to note the difference between trauma-specific services and trauma-informed care, because that can be a little bit confusing sometimes. You can think of trauma-specific services as those techniques or programs that are directly aimed at reducing the symptoms related to the trauma. Mental health services that address trauma-related disorders would be under this umbrella. If you have art therapy, music therapy, equine therapy, or yoga, where the actual intent of it is to reduce the trauma symptoms in the individual, then those would be trauma-specific. Trauma-informed care is really moving from an awareness of what trauma can do to people to understanding care through a trauma lens. Policies, practices, and the physical environment are created or monitored to make sure that they allow for people to be engaged and present and fully participating. We operate with the belief that every interaction with a trauma survivor will either activate a trauma response or not. By delivering trauma-informed care, we can offer a corrective emotional experience and an opportunity for healing. This may sound complicated or challenging, but the principles of trauma-informed care are pretty straightforward. One of the key principles of trauma-informed care is safety. This can refer to physical safety as well as mental or emotional safety. We want to create an environment and program built on trust and transparency. We don't want residents or staff to experience fear or harm. Another important principle is empowerment, voice, and choice. Trauma-informed care aims to empower residents and staff by giving them choices and autonomy to the greatest extent possible. Trauma-informed care is about recognizing strengths and promoting resilience rather than just focusing on the negative or the trauma. Residents and staff need to feel heard, respected, and understood. Collaboration and mutuality are also principles of trauma-informed care. It's important to remember that no one person can provide all the support needed, so it's about working together as a team with a mutual or back and forth relationship. In a trauma-informed setting, we understand the benefit of peers and allies and colleagues who have a shared experience. This sense of community is very helpful for buffering stress. And finally, there's an awareness of the cultural, historical, and gender issues that might be involved. These factors are important enough to understand that we will explore them further in a separate video. So as I mentioned, these principles are pretty straightforward. While there is overlap with these principles, they are all important. As you listen to this, you might be worried that trauma-informed care means that you're going to have to just look the other way when people are behaving in ways that are unacceptable. That isn't the case. Trauma-informed care is built on a foundation of direct and clear communication that supports accountability, responsibility, and transparency. As care providers, we can be compassionate and empathetic while also setting boundaries and having expectations of safety for all. Trauma-informed care is about creating safe, empowering, and compassionate environments for all individuals, especially those who have experienced trauma. It's about understanding the impact of trauma and adjusting our approach to support their healing and growth.